Welcome back to the ABCs of RPGs, where we're teaching you the basics of Call of Cthulhu. I'm Spencer Reese, and in this video, we're covering chases. In Call of Cthulhu, chases have their own mechanics. Think of chases as a series of locations that you are running through in order to catch someone or get away from someone. Everyone starts by rolling a con or drive roll, depending on if you're on foot or in a car. Depending on what level of success you get, you're going to adjust your movement speed to see where everyone is placed between locations, and how many actions you get to take on your turn. If you get a success, you keep your movement rating just as is. On an extreme success, add +1 to your movement. On a failure, -1 from your movement. If the fleeing character has a higher movement than any of the pursuers, then they get away right then and there. If not, the chase begins. Let's show an example though. There are 2 mob gangsters and 2 investigators. All have a base move of 8. The investigators decide to flee the scene. Everyone rolls a con roll. Mobster A fails their roll and subtracts 1 for their movement, bringing them down to a 7 move, while Mobster B succeeds and keeps his movement at 8. Leo gets an extreme success on his roll and adds +1 to bring his movement to a 9. Irene succeeds her roll, so she stays at a movement of 8. However, since Irene has the same movement rating as Mobster B after their rolls, the investigators don't immediately escape, and we have to initiate the chase. Next, we determine how many movement actions everyone gets. You base this off the slowest person's movement rating. Everyone with the same slowest movement rating gets 1 movement action. The slowest person will always get 1 movement action, so use this as a focus point when determining everyone else's movement actions for the chase. Then, for every movement point difference between the slowest person and the fastest, the corresponding person gets that many movement points. For example, our Mobster A has a 7 movement rating in the chase, so he gets 1 movement action for each round during this chase. Both Mobster B and Irene have a movement rating of 8. And because that's 1 movement point higher than 7, the slowest person's movement rating, they get 2 movement actions each turn for the duration of the chase. And finally, since Leo got an extreme success, raising his movement to 9, he gets 3 movement actions each turn because he's 2 movement points above the slowest person at 7. You use movement actions to do actions on your turn. Here are some of the choices. Move forward in the chase. Moving to a location requires 1 movement action unless there's an obstacle or hazard in the way. Perform an attack, cast a spell, or perform some other action require time and perhaps a dice roll, such as picking a lock. Lastly, you determine the turn order based on dex. This is set up just like combat. At this point in time, the movement ratings have been adjusted, movement actions have been figured out, and turn orders set. Your Keeper of Arcane Lore should have drawn out a line with several locations along it. Your Keeper will then place everyone in a location based on their current movement rating, while still placing the fleeing characters 1 or more locations ahead of the pursuers depending on how difficult the chase is. For a normal chase, it should usually be about 2 locations ahead. For example, Mobster A, the slowest character, will be placed at the factory, while Mobster B is placed at the road since he is 1 movement rating higher at 8. The slowest investigator, Irene, with a movement of 8, is placed 2 locations ahead of the fastest mobster at the fence location. Then, Leo is placed 1 location ahead of her at the bakery because he has an adjusted movement rating of 9, 1 more than Irene's. Next, we begin in the turn order we figured out earlier, based on dex, and then each character uses their movement actions on their turn. While in a chase, there may be hazards or barriers. Very similar, but different. Hazards happen in between locations and may hurt the character, but do not prevent the character from progressing. Barriers, on the other hand, are usually at locations and need to be dealt with in order to proceed. Examples of hazards are a 4-foot fence, a narrow alley, or a large stack of cardboard boxes. And examples of barriers are a 7-foot fence, a locked door, or a large chasm. The Keeper will call out a roll based on what is needed to overcome the hazard or barrier, and you'll see if your character is delayed in the chase and possibly hurt or is able to get by. The Keeper will call out a roll based on what is needed to overcome the hazard or barrier, and you'll see if your character is delayed in the chase and possibly hurt or is able to get by. Ending the chase is ultimately up for the Keeper to decide, based on whether the pursuers have lost a quarry. Typically, if there's named locations on the board, the pursuers can still find their targets, but at any point, the fleers can opt to hide. When a pursuer reaches a location where the target is hidden, the keeper calls for a spot hidden roll, setting the difficulty based on the location and time allowed to hide. If the pursuer fails their roll, the target escapes from the chase. Do this till the chase has resolved and then continue the plot. For more chase rules, including additional rules on vehicle chases, consult page 132 of the Keeper's Handbook. In the next video, we're covering what happens when you get hurt and how to heal. Keep on learning, and we'll see you in that video.